In these vast expanses of the Wild West, there are stories that leave a deep mark on the soul. Welcome to the channel. If you are ready to embark on a journey where trials, hope, and true love are intertwined, subscribe and turn on notifications. There are stories ahead of you that cannot be missed. Today I will tell you about a girl who was sent by fate on the most difficult path, the path of pain, betrayal, and misunderstanding. But it is in these trials that fortitude and true love are born, a story that makes you believe that even the hardest things can be the beginning of something amazing. A dusty town with leaning wooden houses and a ringing bell in a saloon hides its secrets. The smell of tobacco mixes with the scent of hay and the scorching sun, and around there are endless prairies and rocky mountains, a place where destinies change. There lived a girl with a face that her father called ugly. There is restraint and sadness in her gaze, and in her soul there is a promise to find her strength and beauty, no matter what. The girl's father was a stern man who was used to keeping everything under control. His world was simple and clear: cut rules, order, work, and strength. Time dictated its own laws, and he followed them without hesitation, confident that this was the only way to survive in this cruel land. His gaze was sharp, and his voice was as hard as the stone of the prairies he grew up on. Beauty for him was not just an appearance. It was steadfastness, order, and the habit of not showing weakness. The girl, with her unusual appearance, did not fit into this image. Her father saw her as a test rather than a gift from fate. His love was not easy, hidden behind harsh words and sometimes harsh criticism. He was afraid that this world would not accept her, that life would be hard and unfair for her. The father's inner conflict manifested itself in his every look and word. He wanted to protect his daughter, but did not know how to do it other than to be gentle with her when there was so much cruelty around. His feelings for her were complex, a mixture of bitterness, hope, and fear. He was a symbol of the old order, the old Wild West, where the weak were too narrow. Nevertheless, behind this severity, there was an unbroken love, albeit expressed through severity and exactingness. He couldn't show her any other way but to follow the traditions, but deep down he understood that her fate would be different from what he had imagined. The girl grew up in the shadow, not the one cast by the setting sun, but the one that enveloped her everywhere, like an invisible cloak. Her appearance, far from the usual canons of beauty, became a reason for ridicule and sidelong glances for others. The sharp features of her face, which her father called ugly, seemed to her like a curse, dragging her into the abyss of loneliness. Every day brought new challenges: whispers behind his back, contemptuous glances, the cold silence of neighbors and even relatives. In these moments, the girl felt fear and shame constrict in her chest, making her want to dissolve, hide from the world. Her heart was full of a painful desire to be accepted, heard, and loved for who she is. In her moments of solitude, she watched the other children as they played, laughed, and ran carelessly through the streets of the town. She dreamed that one day she would be invited into the circle so as not to feel like a stranger. Inwardly, she was like a shadow. She walked around the house and the streets, trying not to attract attention, afraid of becoming a target for new insults. Despite everything, there was a small spark of hope in her soul, the hope that one day she will be seen differently, that someone will be able to get through the wall of prejudice and see her true essence. But at that moment, she remained a prisoner of her fear and insecurity, forced to hide her true self behind a mask of silence. In the depths of the girl lived a quiet dream, a dream of another future, where she would be accepted and loved, not for her appearance, but for her soul. In those rare moments when the world seemed a little less harsh, she allowed herself to dream of love, understanding, and peace, like a distant star that could only be seen on the darkest nights. There were small secret joys in her life: a book in which words came to life and transported her to other worlds, the soft warmth of an animal, the only friend who did not condemn or repel, the whisper of the wind and the gentle touch of the sun on her skin. These moments of light gave me strength to hold on, reminded me that the world is not only full of pain, but also of beauty. The girl began to think more and more often. The real beauty is not in what is seen with the eyes, but in what lives inside, in the soul, kindness, and perseverance. This knowledge became her secret weapon against the cruelty of the world around her. There were times when she tried to prove herself. She learned to read and write, helped those in need, and sought her place among people. But her efforts ran into a wall of misunderstanding and coldness. The world seemed too alien and irreconcilable to her, but there was a spark in her heart, a glimmer of power that would one day turn into a flame and change everything. The girl's life in this small town was filled with cruel taunts and cold stares. Her peers, without mercy, made fun of her, laughing loudly behind her back. Their words, sharp as knives, cut deeper than any wounds. The inhabitants of the town did not spare her. Strange and incomprehensible, she became an easy target for rudeness and contempt. My father was no exception in this world of harsh rules. His love was hidden under layers of severe punishment and cold indifference. He tried to change her spirit, guiding her on the path that he considered the only right one. His words sounded heavy and ruthless, and the punishments left no room for doubt or weakness. He saw his daughter not as a person, but as a test, and in this he experienced his own pain and fear. The most contradictory feelings raged inside the heroine: anger at the world and the father, sadness from loneliness and misunderstanding, and at the same time the determination not to give in and not to break. Each stroke of fate only hardened her spirit, forcing her to seek light even in the darkest corners. The company around her increased her sense of isolation and inferiority, as if every day was another test of strength. But it was during this period of internal struggle that an understanding emerged. The path to freedom and happiness lies through one's own efforts, even if the unknown and terrible lies ahead. This moment was a turning point, the first step towards not just surviving, but living and fighting for your place in the world. The aggravation of the internal struggle did not concern only the girl. The father, strict and unyielding, was also experiencing an invisible war within himself. His harsh world, where everything had to be governed by rules and rigidity, now seemed to be bursting at the seams. He saw his daughter's future blurring in the darkness of loneliness and misunderstanding, like sand slipping through his fingers. A conflict was raging in his soul. How could he be both tough and protective when his heart was tearing apart? Every day brought a heavy realization that her place was not here, amid contempt and prejudice. He understood that her ugly appearance, which he had once condemned, had now become her curse. But the love hidden under the hard gaze wouldn't let me rest. What does it mean to love in a world where weakness equals death? How can you protect her if the world around you is ruthless? His thoughts returned to the Apache tribe, people about whom there were various rumors, but who in his eyes carried wisdom and a different outlook on life. They did not judge by appearance. They did not measure the value of a person only according to the rules of society. For him, the Apaches were a place of hope, a place where his daughter could find peace and acceptance. This decision was not easy for him, as if cutting his heart with a knife. To put her in the hands of strangers, not knowing what was coming next, fear and hope were intertwined in an inextricable knot. But my father felt it. It's the only way she can survive and maybe become something more than she could be here. And when night fell, he stood at the window, looking out at the distant lights and the whispering wind on the prairies, his fists clenched tightly. The decision was made. It was not the end, but the beginning of a new chapter in which the girl's fate was woven into a foreign culture full of trials, but also extraordinary opportunities. When my father first thought about the Apache tribe, images of fierce warriors with fiery eyes and a rebellious disposition surfaced in his imagination. The world he knew saw them as a threat and enmity, but the present that opened before him and his daughter was completely different. The Apaches appeared as a people with deep spirituality, as if living in harmony with the very earth and the winds of the prairies. For the girl, this world seemed both alien and fascinating. There was no harsh brutality here that haunted her in the city. Instead, she felt the breath of nature in everything. In the weaving of grass huts, in the quiet singing of birds at dawn, in the soft touch of the wind, which seemed to her a warm friend. Apache life was filled with rituals and traditions that taught respect for the earth, the stars, and every living being. In this tribe, inner strength and spiritual beauty were valued, not external manifestations. My father, despite his prejudices and fears, could not help but notice how there was a gap between the harsh reality of his world and the smooth harmony of this tribe. The Apaches didn't just seem like strangers, they were the bearers of a different wisdom, capable of healing wounds that couldn't be healed with words. It was a place where the girl could find a new life, not as an exile, but as part of something bigger, whole, and eternal. Comparing this quiet force of nature and tribal customs with the cold cruelty of the civilized world, her father felt the bitter truth. It was here, among the Apaches, that she could find the protection and acceptance she had been deprived of for so long. And although fear and uncertainty still lived in his heart, he understood that this break with the past was a necessary test on the way to her future. Leaving home was like breaking an invisible thread that connected the girl to the past, to the world where she felt like a stranger so many times. That day, silence spoke more than any words. The farewell did not need loud speeches and explanations. Everything happened at the level of looks and touches filled with bitterness and tenderness. The girl felt fear and despair intertwined in her heart, fear of the unknown, of a new world where she would be alone, and despair that the familiar could not be returned. But at the same time, a small spark of curiosity and hope lived deep somewhere. After all, this path could be the beginning of something else, something real, which she had been looking for so long. My father stood by, wrapped up in his feelings and thoughts. There was a heaviness of farewell in his gaze, as if he were giving away a part of himself, entrusting to someone else's hands what was most precious to him. His love was silent and complex, hidden under an armor of severity and anxiety. He couldn't say anything comforting to her because the words seemed too weak in front of what was coming. But despite the pain and doubts, her father believed that among the Apaches she would find the protection, the strength that was lacking here. And in this silent farewell, the most important note sounded: hope for the future, for the light that has not yet gone out. The girl took the first step into a new world, carrying with her all this mixed range of feelings: fear and courage, despair and faith. The girl, crossing the threshold of the Apache tribe for the first time, felt how her world changed in an instant. Meeting the leader, a man with eyes that reflected calm wisdom, was an unexpected revelation for her. His presence was not loud and intimidating, but quiet and enveloping, like an ancient prairie spirit that had found shelter in this man. There was a new world around them. The tribe breathed and sounded in its own way. The smells of fresh earth, herbs, and smoking campfires mixed with the morning air, creating an atmosphere that seemed both alien and mesmerizing. The sounds of laughter, songs, and unhurried conversations penetrated the consciousness, promising a new beginning. But this world was full of incomprehensible rules and customs that seemed like a mystery to the girl. The tribal language sounded like music, but without an interpreter, every word lost its meaning. Rituals smoothly integrated into everyday life caused confusion at first. Everything was different, and it seemed that you had to go through an invisible wall to understand and accept this way of life. She wandered among the people, cautiously and curiously, trying to find her place. Every look, every movement was filled with meaning that she had to decipher. Internally, the girl struggled with a sense of alienness, but a quiet determination began to awaken in her heart, to understand, accept, and become a part of this new world. Confusion and anxiety raged inside the girl, like a storm tearing her soul apart. The fear of losing herself, of forgetting everything she knew, gripped her heart and stifled her thoughts. Everything around her seemed alien and incomprehensible, and the shadow of loneliness that had haunted her for so long was once again wrapped in strong bonds. But along with this fear, there were glimmers of hope. Deep down, an understanding was emerging. This transfer into the hands of the Apaches is not the end of the road, but the beginning of something new and unexplored. An inner voice whispered that maybe here, among people with different wisdom, she could find herself anew. Slowly, carefully, she began to open up to this world, allowing herself to feel the touch of a new life. Every breath, every sound, every new acquaintance became a brick in her inner rebirth. She learned to listen not only to words, but also to silence, to read not only signs, but also hearts. A quiet realization was emerging in her mind. Despite the pain and fear, there was an opportunity in this change to reveal new strengths and qualities: perseverance, wisdom, and fortitude. The path will be difficult and thorny, but it leads to freedom, to the life she has always dreamed of. The first few days after she joined the tribe were like waking up from a long, hard sleep. The world that opened up in front of her was unusual, full of new sounds, smells, and sensations. The morning light seemed different here, softer, cleaner, as if every drop of dew on the grass carried the promise of a new life. She woke up before dawn, watching the pinkish sky open over the hills, and the smoke from the campfires slowly stretched to the clouds, absorbing the rhythm of the awakening earth. She didn't know how to behave properly, didn't understand many words, didn't feel like a part of these people, but there was less hostility in their silence than in the screams of her former life. No one here chased her away, ridiculed her, or cut off her words. She was a stranger, but not rejected. She felt eyes on her, studying, cautious, sometimes warm. These people knew how to look deep without jumping to conclusions. And in this attentive silence, there was a new experience for her: acceptance, not expressed in words. Every morning she sat at the spring behind the settlement, feeling the cold water running between her fingers. In those early days, there was almost always an old woman by her side, a woman with deep wrinkles and hands that knew wind, sun, and pain. The old woman didn't say anything, but sometimes she held out a root for her to chew, an infusion, or just sat next to her in silence. Her presence was like a stone in a riverbed, solid, calm, unchanging. The girl did not understand why she was coming, but she felt that her loneliness was no longer silent. She watched the women weave, and decorate their dresses with patterns whose meaning was still unclear to her. She watched the men who left in the morning and returned with loot or hunting trophies. The children were laughing and running around as if they didn't even notice her. Sometimes one of them would glance at her, full of interest, but not fear or contempt, and that was enough to make a timid gratitude spring up in her heart. She was like a shadow making its way through the morning mist of a new world, uncertain, awkward, not yet part of the picture, but no longer separated from it. Her footsteps were quiet, like an animal coming out of hiding for the first time, but there was something real in those steps, an attempt to feel, recognize, understand, not with my mind, but with my heart. She couldn't describe what exactly touched her in this world: the singing of women at sunset, the smell of dried herbs, ashes on her skin, or the movements of her hands that spoke without words. But something about this simple, rhythmic existence resonated inside her, as if the memory of her ancestors, buried deep in her blood, responded to every whisper of the wind. She didn't feel like one of them yet, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel completely alone. He did not appear immediately. Like everything important in her new life, his presence was revealed not through a loud introduction, but through silent constancy. She noticed him at first at the edge of her field of vision, a tall figure with a straight back, a shadow against the background of the evening campfire. He did not approach for no reason, did not try to speak, did not exert pressure, but his appearance left a feeling of stability, as if a rock had suddenly appeared nearby, on which one could lean without fear of falling. He was not a chief, and yet the other members of the tribe treated him with special reverence. They rarely called him, but when they did, they spoke with respect and attention. He moved calmly, with dignity, as if each of his movements had its own purpose. His eyes, dark and deep like a lake in the foothills, did not seek eye contact. But if his gaze met hers, something was born in those seconds that did not require words. Understanding, a slight hint of recognition. He didn't teach her directly, and yet she began to feel his presence in everyday details. He appeared next to her when she once again tried to bring water and splashed half the way, when she could not cope with the knot on the basket, when she lost her way. He didn't come close, just gestured from afar where to step, how to hold his back, and how to distribute his weight. His instructions were rare but precise. It wasn't concern tinged with pity. It was something else, as if he recognized her. She was watching him from afar, how he makes a fire in the morning, not with matches, but with flint. How he picks up a boy who has fallen from a horse, not with words, but with a calm gesture. How he helps the elderly without the slightest strain on his face. His strength was that he didn't demonstrate anything. There was no need to prove it. He knew who he was, and he knew that everyone else felt it. One day she realized that she was waiting for him to appear, that in those moments when he passed by her, a strange warmth flared up in her chest. It was not an attraction, not a romantic dream. It was a feeling of reliability, rare and precious. In a world where everyone abandoned, refused, and turned away, he stood like a tree root embedded in the ground, silently, simply, inevitably. That's how their silent bond began. He hardly spoke, and that was his strength. He was her first pillar in this world, not a shield, not a savior, but a guideline by which she could consult when everything inside was trembling with fear and uncertainty. Through him, she began to realize that there are many more answers to be found in silence than in any speech. And this realization became a new step in her inner rebirth. She felt like something irreversible was happening in her. Her steps, timid and cautious until recently, now led forward towards an unknown but inviting one. The world that opened up to her in the tribe was not just different, it was like a fabric woven from silence, the breath of the earth and ancient memory. And now it's time to go through something that changes not only the look, but also the soul. The first came the cleansing ritual, a meeting with cold water. She was woken up before dawn, when the darkness was still clinging to the ground. The women of the tribe led her to the river, silent, focused, as if they were carrying not just her body, but her destiny. The water that day was icy, as if it had come from the very top of the mountains, but no one flinched, no one explained. Only nature spoke, with the rustle of leaves, the breath of the wind, and the smooth surface of the water reflecting the stars. She entered the river, and every movement was like saying goodbye. The clothes thrown off the body seemed not just a cloth, but a layer of the past. When the water touched the skin, it seemed to pierce to the bones, drawing out fear, pain, and memories. She was shivering, but not from the cold, from letting go. The tears that mixed with the drops on her cheeks were the first words spoken in a long time, not with her voice, but with her heart. She looked into the water and saw not herself there, but the shadow of who she was. Purification has become not just a symbol, but the first real step into a new world. After that, the fast began. She was taken to a small hut at the edge of the parking lot, a lonely one built of branches, earth, and silence. She was supposed to stay there for a few days. No food, no words, no touching. Just her thoughts, and the wind that blew between the walls. At first it was strange, the absence of sounds, habitual movement, voices. But with every passing hour, I realized that silence speaks loudest. She was remembering his father's face, stern and silent, the laughter of those who laughed at her, his reflection in the window when he wanted to disappear, and the feeling that lived in my chest was like a trapped bird. At first, everything inside was raging, anger, resentment, despair. Then silence came. Real. She lay there, staring at the ceiling of reeds and listening to her heartbeat, steady and calm. And then she started letting go. Not to forget, but to let go. Untie the knots inside, unwrap the memories clenched into fists and put them in the ground. Let them become a part of what will pass. On the third day, she was taken out of seclusion. The women of the tribe surrounded her without saying a word, but there was strength in their gazes. They took her to another place, under the open sky, where the flames of the campfire rose to the stars. There, by the fire, her body was covered with drawings. It wasn't a decoration. Every line, every symbol was like a word written on her skin. They didn't ask who she was. They didn't judge. They didn't wonder. They were just creating a map, an inner, secret one that only she knew. The paint was thick, warm, and smelled of earth and herbs. The women's hands moved softly, precisely as if following the breath of nature itself. A circle appeared somewhere at the base of the neck, a symbol of the beginning. There's a tangle of lines on her back, like the roads she's already traveled. There are thin leaf-shaped marks on the wrists, a sign of growth. She did not understand the meaning of everything, but she felt that something was being born in her. This night was not just a time of drawings, it was a night of metamorphosis. She sat by the campfire, her skin pulsing under the patterns, and inside there was a feeling of new density. The one that is not palpable with your fingers, but is felt in every glance, every step. In the morning, she woke up different. The sun rose slowly, gently, illuminating her face. She touched her skin, where the freshness of the symbols was still felt. My body was tired, but also light. It was as if a heavy veil had been lifted from her, leaving only the essence. She came out of the hut and saw how she was greeted with glances. Not hostile, not wary, calm, accepting. And among them all, he was the one who became her invisible core, mentor. He didn't say anything, didn't come closer, didn't make a gesture, but there was more to the way he looked than 1,000 words. In that look, she read a confession, not of love, not of admiration, but of respect. He saw that she had gone through the rite and had come out not just a survivor, but a renewed one. She didn't know what was coming next. I didn't know if it would be an easy path or full of challenges again. But for the first time since childhood, she felt like she was walking down a road she had chosen on her own. Without fear, without shame, with that light inside that she could no longer hide. These trials were not the end, they were the beginning of her new life. When the silence of the ceremony fell silent and the singing of the women disappeared in the first rays of the day, only a vibration remained in the air, invisible but tangible, as if the earth itself remembered and accepted what had happened. The girl stood in the center of the circle, and the world around her was no longer the same. She felt it in every breath, in every drop of light falling on her face. The women of the tribe slowly retreated, leaving behind not an emptiness, but a feeling of fullness. Now she felt their power inside her, not as an external support, but as a part of her own being. The tenderness with which they touched her shoulders remained in her body, turning into an invisible armor. The words that she did not understand sounded inside her, as if they were born in her heart. A new name. It didn't just decorate her, it became the key. Not to the past, but to a new, still unexplored, but such a native road. The fire in the center of the circle was burning low. The smoke rose up in thin spirals, reminding that everything was leaving to give way to new things. The elder stood next to her, not leaving immediately, but lingering, as if guarding this first moment of the girl's new life. There was an approving severity and silent joy in her gaze. No praise, no parting words. Everything has already been conveyed without words. And it was in this silence, in this silent confession, that the heroine felt, she's part of the circle now. Then a new stage began, not a rite, but a continuation of the birth. She was led through rows of standing people, men, women, and children. No one spoke, but everyone touched her arm, shoulder, and hair. It was like walking through a living river, where every touch left a trail of light. She walked slowly, as if she was walking on the edge of reality where time didn't matter. She was greeted not as a stranger, not as a victim, but as a sister, a daughter, someone who had walked through fire to become herself. Apache, the silent mentor, stood at the very end. He did not approach, did not extend his hand. But his eyes, deep, attentive, like stars on a cold night, met hers. And in that look, she read everything. respect, acceptance, and that very tacit promise that he was there. He wasn't the one leading her by the hand, but he was the one watching from the edge, ready to lend a shoulder if she stumbled. He wasn't guiding her. He was letting her walk on her own. In the evening, around the campfire, when the tribe gathered for a meal together, she was invited to sit next to the older women. She was offered food, water, and a cloth to wrap herself up from the cold. She felt the warmth not only from the fire, but also from every look, every gesture. Her name sounded among the conversations, whispered from one person to another, not as a stranger, but as an ancient one, as if it had always been with them, just waiting to be pronounced. That night, she couldn't sleep for a long time. Lying on a bed of soft skins, under a canopy of branches, she looked up at the sky. The stars were different, brighter, closer. Or maybe she's the one who's changed. Her body still remembered the touch of the ritual, the cold of the water and the warmth of her hands, the smell of wood smoke and the ringing silence in the circle. There was no fear left in her. The silence remained, deep and alive, the one in which the most important things are born: strength, faith, love. Now she knew it wasn't the end, and it wasn't just a new beginning. This is a return, not to my old life, but to myself. She wasn't lost. She was on her way, and this path led not along the paths of pain, but through it, to a place where the spirit merges with the earth, where a word is not needed to understand, and where silence heals better than any voice. She fell asleep with the feeling that her name was now sounding in the wind, in the rustle of leaves, in the breath of the campfire. And the world finally accepted her. And she accepted herself. The days passed one after another, and in each of them the heroine felt herself gradually letting go of her former self. She learned to listen not only to the sounds around her, but also to the silence between them, the one that revealed hidden meanings and secrets. In this new life, the mentor was there, although his presence was more often felt than seen. He was like an invisible guardian who appeared at those moments when it became especially difficult for her. His silent observation wasn't control or judgment, but warm, steadfast support that didn't require words. He was in no hurry to teach her through speech, because in the tribe, knowledge was transmitted through touch, looks, movements, and nature, which was their book. He showed her how to listen to the wind, feel its whispers, catch secret signs in the rustle of leaves. Carefully, without haste, he led her to understand that strength is not just muscles, but a deep connection with the world around her and the ability to see what is hidden from the surface gaze. Every time she stopped, overcome by doubts and fears, he was there, not intrusively, but like a shadow that supports her at the right moment. His eyes were full of silence, but there was an inextinguishable spark of wisdom in them, transmitted without words. This silence was their conversation, deeper than any speech, filled with trust and understanding. The heroine was beginning to see that there was no need for constant speaking in this world. Sometimes it's enough just to be close, to share moments of silence and attention in order to find your strength. The glances gliding over her face and gestures became a bridge connecting two souls who did not have a common language, but had a common goal: to learn how to live and breathe with this earth, with its wisdom and beauty. At such moments, she felt a new feeling awaken in her, something more than gratitude, something subtle and bright that defies a simple explanation. It was an unspoken bond, quiet but strong, like the roots of an ancient tree. And although no word was spoken, there was everything in that silence: trust, recognition, a promise of support, and a willingness to walk together even if the road was long and difficult. So day after day, step by step, she plunged deeper into the life of the tribe, discovering powers in herself that she had not known before. And in this process of tacit intimacy with her mentor, not only confidence was born, but also a gentle, almost weightless thread, linking their destinies into one. Night descended on the tribe, enveloping it in a soft darkness in which every sparkle of stars seemed alive and talking. By the campfire, where the shadows flickered, time slowed down as if it breathed with them. In this silence, Filled with the crackle of firewood and the rustle of leaves, the heroine felt her inner world gradually begin to calm down. The air was cool, but not cold. It embraced and protected, like a gentle patroness of a new path. Next to her was a mentor, not just a warrior, but a man with a history just like her. Their silence was full of meaning and power. It said that words are not always needed when hearts are ready to hear each other. In one of those moments, her hand accidentally touched his, a light touch that became a confession of the pain they both shared in secret. This touch was more than just a gesture. It was a bridge between two souls longing for understanding and acceptance. At that moment, the heroine saw in him not just a mentor, but a reflection of her own soul. There was a story of loneliness, loss, and struggle in his eyes, as deep and fragile as her own. He, like her, had once been a stranger in this world, lost and searching for meaning. This thought filled her with inexpressible tenderness and compassion. They were connected by an invisible thread, two travelers walking through the darkness in search of light. There was a bond between them that could not be described in words. She was silent, subtle, but inescapable, like a breath of wind that gently touches your face at the right moment. This bond promised to be strong, built on trust and respect, despite all the trials that lie ahead. She was the beginning of something new, deep and real, which could become a support for both. Under the starry sky, by the flames of a campfire, their souls found each other in a silence that spoke more than 1,000 words. And in this silent union, hope was born. Hope for healing, for acceptance, and for the strength they could find together. The days turned into weeks, and with each new dawn, the girl felt more and more like something ancient and strong was awakening inside her. Her steps became more and more confident, each movement precise, as if she was learning to regain control of her own body and spirit. Where fear and doubt had prevailed before, resilience was now growing, quiet but unyielding. Her head no longer bent under the weight of other people's stares and reproaches. Now she walked on the ground, with her chin held high, absorbing the breath of the wind and the light of the sun, as if she were the heiress of a new life given by the tribe. Her eyes no longer sought protection in the shadows, but an inner light shone in them, reflecting her growing confidence and new purpose. Her voice has changed. It has become even and calm, ready to carry her thoughts and feelings into the world rather than hiding from it. Silence, which had previously seemed like a chain binding her, turned into an ally, a space for reflection and strength. Now she knew that being herself was not a weakness, but the greatest courage. Every day brought new lessons and discoveries. She learned to read the signs of nature, to understand the language of the wind and the rustle of leaves, to distinguish the mood of people around her. All of this made her part of the tribe, part of a world that had once seemed alien and incomprehensible. Her inner world, like a flower, blossomed in the rays of wisdom and patience, and with it grew strength, not that which is measured by muscles or weapons, but that which is born from the depths of the soul. This force was invisible, but tangible, support in difficult moments, and support when it seemed that the whole world was against her. The looks that had hurt before now only confirmed her changes. She was no longer hiding, no longer afraid of being seen and understood. There was a conviction in her heart that she was worthy of respect and love, that her past was just one of the pages, and there was a whole book of a new life ahead. And in this growth, in this unfolding of strength, a real metamorphosis began, a transition from a state of vulnerability to a state of strength and freedom, in which she could finally become who she was always meant to be. As evening approached, when the sky turned deep shades of purple and gold, the tribe gathered around a large bonfire. The sounds of the drums reverberated through the night, forming a rhythm that seemed to beat into everyone's very heart. It was not just a dance, it was the breath of the people, their soul, their strength. The girl stood among her new relatives, and every step of her body corresponded to the ancient rhythm, weaving into the general movement like a string in a powerful song of life. She didn't just repeat the movements, she lived them, feeling the energy of the tribe overwhelm her from the inside. Everything around her, fire, earth, people, became a part of her very being. Her gaze no longer wandered in search of support. It was clear and calm. Those eyes reflected a power that did not appear suddenly, but grew out of every ordeal, every fear experienced, and every lesson learned. She was no longer a shadow lost in the past. Now she was a light, maybe still quiet, but true and alive. This transformation was not just an external change, but a deep metamorphosis of the soul, which went through fire and water and came out renewed. In the rhythm of the tribe, she found not only herself, but also her place in a world where every step was filled with meaning and confidence. And at that moment, amidst the flames, sounds, and hearts beating in unison, a new story was born. The story of a girl who was able to walk the path from loneliness to belonging, from fear to strength, from shadows to light. A story that she could now live fully, and which was just beginning. She climbed the hill where the wind gently played with her loose hair, as if nature itself welcomed her rebirth. Her gaze pierced the horizon, where the sky merged with the earth in an endless dance of light and shadow. This moment was filled with an extraordinary silence, the silence not of emptiness, but of deep inner harmony. He was standing a little to one side, Apache, her mentor and protector. His silent presence spoke more than any words. There was no need for loud confessions or explanations between them, only an understanding that this path was just the beginning of a new chapter, full of suspense, but also of hope. She felt strong, ready to face any challenges, and in this quiet peace there was confidence. No matter what happened next, she was no longer the one who was afraid. Now she's part of this world, part of a larger story that is yet to be written. And the wind, whispering through the grasses and leaves, seemed to convey the ancient wisdom of the tribe. Every end is always the beginning of something new. The wind began to change its character. A light whisper of foliage turned into an alarming rustle, as if nature itself warned of danger slowly approaching the tribe's peace. In the distance, among the shifting contours of mountains and sprawling trees, silhouettes appeared, rough and heavy, like the shadows of an alien world, bringing destruction and fear. They were migrants whom the locals knew only from stories, people whose hearts seemed to be made of stone and whose eyes were cold, devoid of compassion. Their footsteps were heavy, their voices loud and harsh, like thunder in the midst of the silence that they used to keep in this corner of the earth. They were not looking for peace, only power and control, the desire to subjugate someone else's land to their will. Bounty hunters, greedy for profit and fame, sought out fugitives and those who were called undesirable. For them, the tribe was just an obstacle, a place where they could get easy prey or find another trophy. The forest, which had hitherto seemed like protection and shelter, began to seem cramped and vulnerable. Every rustle of branches, every crackle of dry branches underfoot caused alarm. The tribe felt it as an internal itch, a premonition of trouble that could not be ignored. The elders, silent and thoughtful, gathered in a circle, attentively listening to the wind and observing the changes in nature. The behavior of birds, running animals, even flowers and herbs seemed to warn of the imminent invasion of strangers. The tribesmen became wary. They understood that their peace of mind was on the line, that the usual rituals and customs now serve not only to strengthen the spirit, but also to protect against external evil. Doubts and fear were mixed with a determination to save your home at any cost, not to destroy what had been created with love and wisdom for centuries. The girl, watching what was happening for the first time, felt the pulse of a real threat. Not those inner fears and doubts that tormented before, but a real and tangible enemy standing outside her new world. She saw how the faces of those who seemed like friends and mentors yesterday changed under the weight of impending danger. Her heart sank, but deep down there remained that quiet confidence. This test would not break her, but would make her stronger. And in this tense expectation, even nature itself seemed to hold its breath. Everything around was preparing for a fight, for protection, for a desperate attempt to preserve what is precious. Every tree, every stone, and every stream of water seemed to become an invisible fortress, behind which stood people with ancient wisdom and strength that few outsiders could guess. Thus began a new chapter, the chapter of the struggle for freedom, for home, for the right to be oneself in a world where words and customs can become a weapon stronger than any sword. And the girl was ready to join this battle, no longer as a stranger, but as a defender, part of a tribe whose spirit was as strong as the earth under her feet. The first alarm bell pierced her soul when the silence, which seemed so familiar to her now, was suddenly filled with strange sounds, the rustle of dry grass, the crackle of branches, footsteps walking through the thicket. That sound didn't promise anything good. For the first time, the girl truly felt fear, the one that shackles and makes her heart beat faster, but with it another force flared up in her chest, the determination not to give up. She remembered the words and gestures of her Apache mentor, who didn't need to talk to teach her what was important. He taught not only how to survive, but also how to see the world differently, with attention to the smallest details, to the signs of nature, and to oneself. He showed that a threat does not always come with thunder and fury. It is often quiet, hidden, like a snake in the grass, and to notice it, you need to be sharp and attentive. The girl was learning to read these signs. The wind that changed directions, the shadows that moved in strange ways, the smells that had previously seemed indifferent to her now acquired meaning and importance. Every glance, every movement around them became parts of a single picture that told of an impending storm. Understanding came not only at the level of physical danger. She realized that fighting wasn't just about swords or gunfire. This is a battle for the spirit, for the steadfastness of the heart, and faith in oneself and one's people. It is this spiritual power that will be the shield that protects them from destruction and ruin. Inside, she felt something change. Fear was still there, but now it wasn't the enemy. He became the fuel for her inner strength, the fire that awakened her unbroken spirit. She understood that it was this steadfastness that would determine her path, that not only her life depended on her, but also the lives of those whom she now called family. And in this new understanding, the girl was taking her first, albeit timid, but firm steps on the path of the defender. Her gaze became sharper, her movements more confident. She did not allow herself to sink into panic. Instead, she learned to be a part of the tribe, a part of this land and its protection. She was no longer just a lost girl. Now she was the voice of silence, a look in the dark, and a hand ready to hold a sword not only for herself, but for all those who needed her strength. And this realization became the first spark in the fire, which will soon flare up in full force. With anxiety gripping their hearts, the tribe gathered their forces. In an open clearing under the shade of tall trees, where light filtered through the dense branches, people stood in a circle. Everyone knew that difficult times were coming. They were not just a community, but a family connected not only by blood, but also by spirit. In this silence, full of unexpressed anxiety, there was an understanding. Tomorrow could be the day of the struggle for what is dear. The tribe was no stranger to such challenges. Their wisdom, a gift inherited from their ancestors, consisted not in brute force, but in a deep knowledge of the earth, nature, and themselves. They did not seek a direct clash, knowing that victory would come to the one who would be able to take advantage of their native territory. Each of them understood that the forest was their ally, the river and the hills were natural walls and traps. The leaders and elders, not verbose but determined, assigned the roles. Some went to disguise themselves in dense thickets, preparing ambushes. Others laid traps on the trails, hidden pits, sharp stakes that could stop even the most brazen enemies. Every corner of the familiar land turned into a defensive weapon where nature itself became a shield and a sword. The girl, who had become not just a stranger among them, but a real daughter of the tribe, took an active part in the preparation. Her movements were quick and precise, her eyes attentive, and her heart full of determination. She felt that now she was not just an observer, but a defender who was responsible for the fate of her new home. Next to her was Apache, a silent mentor and friend whose wisdom and strength served as an example. His calm presence gave confidence, and his supportive look spoke more than any words. He conveyed knowledge to her not only with gestures, but also with his spirit, showing that true strength lies in unity with nature and his loved ones. Every moment of preparation was filled with meaning and hope. It wasn't just a defense plan, it was a ritual in which everyone felt like they were part of something bigger, part of a living force that couldn't be broken. The girl understood that this day would test not only her courage, but also her faith, and teach her to be strong in every sense. And when dusk began to fall on the earth, the tribe took up its positions. There was a fire burning in every heart, not only fear, but also hope, which gave strength to withstand the coming storm. The wind, running through the leaves, seemed to be the whisper of the ancestors. We are one. We are a force that cannot be broken. When the day of the clash came, the tribe met the enemy not only with strength, but also with wisdom gained over the years of living in harmony with nature. It was not just a fight, it was a battle of wits, the art of disguise and cunning, where every little thing could decide the outcome. Apache, a wise and prudent strategist, guided the actions of the tribe, but did not suppress freedom of thought. His gaze was deep and calm, as if he could read the movement of the wind and the whisper of the grasses, telling him where to take a step and where to retreat. He trusted the girl, who was no longer a novice, but had grown into a true defender, showing initiative and ingenuity. The tribe used natural elements as weapons and protection. The wind that could sweep away their tracks sounded like a human shield hiding their movements. Fiery bonfires lit at distant points served as decoys, distracting the enemy to the side where hidden traps awaited him. The water in the river bays was a trap for the attackers, whose screams echoed, creating the illusion of many warriors. The sounds of nature became allies. The rustle of leaves masked the rustle of footsteps. The cries of birds confused the enemy. The girl learned to listen and understand this symphony. In it, she found clues that helped her survive and win. With each tactical move, the tension increased. The opponent, accustomed to brute force, did not expect such dexterity and subtlety. His rage clashed with the patience and wisdom of the tribe, whose spirit was as strong as the roots of ancient trees. Interaction with animals is not just a union, but mutual understanding. The animals of the tribe, from nimble hawks to wise wolves, warned of the approach of the enemy, helped to find safe paths. This connection to nature was the key to survival. The girl felt her inner strength growing. She not only protected herself, but also became a part of the living organism of the tribe, where every element, man, beast, element, acted in a single rhythm. The struggle for freedom was not only a battle for the land, but also for the right to live according to one's own laws, with respect for life and nature. There was something more to these actions, a connection to the past, present, and future that gave them the strength to resist even the darkest shadows. As the sun set, the tribe stood unbroken and ready for new challenges. The girl and the Apache, shoulder to shoulder, looked into the distance where danger could still lurk. But now there was a fire burning in their hearts that no one could extinguish. The sun was already sinking below the horizon, painting the sky with a blood-red light, when the moment of the decisive battle arrived. Tension filled the air, as if the earth itself was frozen in anticipation of the coming battle. The enemy advanced, their footsteps thundering hollowly, echoing through the trees. They carried with them a thirst for destruction and a greed for control, not understanding the depth of the power that dwelt in this place. The girl, who had become not just a prisoner, but a warrior, felt her body and mind merge into a single whole. Every breath, every movement was filled with a new power that seemed to awaken inside her. Her agility, subtle and fast, allowed her to evade punches, get close to her opponent, and find weak spots. It was not just a struggle of the body, but also a battle of the spirit, unwavering, determined, and free. Apache was standing next to her, his gaze full of quiet confidence and support. There was no need for words between them. Their silence spoke louder than any speech. It was the unity of two souls, ready to fight side by side, not to retreat or give up. Their actions were coordinated, like the movements of nature, lightning fast and precise. Every punch, every throw was imbued with the strength of the tribe and the wisdom of generations. The girl was no longer afraid of battle. She was determined to defend her new home, new people, and a new life. Her movements amazed even the most experienced warriors of the enemy, who could not understand where such strength and confidence came from. The firelight reflected in her eyes, like a reflection of an inner flame that no one could extinguish. All around her was the wild noise of battle, screams, and the roar of collisions. But inside there was silence, a calmness that allowed her to see and feel every moment. Apache is nearby. His presence is like a rock, motionless and reliable. He supported her, guided her, but allowed her to make her own decisions, trusting her instincts and courage. Together, they were more than just warriors. They were a symbol of a new beginning, hope and strength that could not be broken. When the fight reached its climax and the enemies began to retreat, the girl felt that this moment had changed everything. She became a part of history, which was written with her own blood and will to live. This day showed that freedom is not just a word, but a state of mind that must be defended until the last breath. Evening found them in a clearing, among crackling campfires and the calm whisper of the wind. They knew that the battle was not over, but now there was a fire burning in their hearts that would not be extinguished even in the darkest night. They were ready for any challenges, because together they are a force capable of changing fate. As the last glimmer of the battle faded into twilight, the enemy retreated, conceding a temporary victory to the tribe. But even in the silence of the evening, the weight of uncertainty was felt, as if the earth itself was whispering about the coming trials. It was not a final victory, but only a postponement, a moment before a new storm. The enemies, although they have retreated, have left a shadow behind them, reminding us that their thirst for capture and power has not faded. The tribe, tired but unconquered, strengthened in its traditions and cohesion. Each member knew that peace was only a brief moment before the next storm. The girl, who had once come as a stranger and frightened, now stood among them with her head held high. She accepted not only the tribe, but also herself, her power, her path as a defender, protecting not only people, but also the spirit of this land. This path was difficult and long. The struggle for freedom and home is not a single event, but an ongoing process that requires constant vigilance and fortitude. The girl understood that now she was not just a part of history, she was its creator, and the future of those around her depended on her perseverance. This thought gave her strength and inspiration to move forward despite all the dangers. His gaze, directed into the far distance, reflected a new determination to go his own way, despite fear and doubt. She became a symbol of rebirth, hope, and the eternal struggle for the right to be herself and live in the world she now called home. And the wind, walking through the grasses and branches of trees, whispered the ancient wisdom again. Freedom is not a gift, but a challenge that only the strong accept. As night fell over the tribe, dark clouds gathered on the horizon, like harbingers of new storms. In the distance, the roar of the wind mixed with the rustle of leaves, creating an atmosphere of anxious expectation. These clouds carried not only the approach of bad weather, but also the shadows of future trials, those that sooner or later had to overtake everyone who chose the path of struggle and protection. The heroine stood on the edge of the hill, where the wind played with her hair, and in her eyes there was a quiet but firm understanding. There are new challenges ahead, unexplored roads and moments when she will have to choose again between fear and strength. Apache was next to him, his gaze deep and full of silent confidence. They didn't need words to understand each other. This silence spoke of unity, that together they were stronger than any troubles. The evening sky, interspersed with glimpses of stars and heavy clouds, became a symbol of their journey. Difficult, dangerous, but filled with meaning and hope. They knew that the struggle was not over yet, and new challenges were on the horizon that would strengthen their spirit and strengthen their alliance. But in this silence and darkness, among the wind and shadows, an unbroken faith was born. Faith in oneself, in one's loved ones, and that together they could walk through any storm. And so, standing on the threshold of a new day, they prepared for what fate would bring them. Because every new dawn is not just a light, but a chance to start anew, stronger and wiser than before. In the twilight of the pre-dawn hour, when the first rays of the sun were still timidly touching the treetops, their gazes involuntarily found each other. Something that did not require words was emerging between her and Apache, a tacit understanding, deep and multifaceted. It was not just the attraction of bodies, but the subtle play of souls, the interweaving that was felt even in silence. The wind gliding over the grass and leaves seemed like an invisible bridge between them, carrying whispers and light touches that no one saw, but which were felt with all their hearts. A quiet stream flowing nearby mirrored their state. Calm, but full of hidden power, it did not hurry, only gently rustled, as if reminding them that the connection between them was developing gradually, naturally, as part of a large and ancient world. The sunset, which left crimson and golden streaks in the sky, spoke of the transition, that a new stage was about to begin where they would become closer to each other. In this silence and peace, their hearts beat in unison without requiring words or explanations. Their silence was filled with meaning, and their looks were a promise that despite all the trials, their union would grow stronger because it was based on understanding and respect, which is difficult to convey with a voice. This depth of spiritual intimacy went far beyond ordinary feelings. It touched the roots hidden deep inside, those that connect a person with the earth, with the wind, with life. And at that moment, standing side by side, they were no longer just two people. They became part of something bigger, a force that binds everyone living in this world. Every sigh, every gesture, everything said that they were moving forward together, despite the difficulties, despite the fears. Their bond was quiet but unshakable, like nature itself, which would always find a way to survive and thrive. This was the beginning of a chapter where love did not need words, where every moment was filled with meaning, and every dawn promised new hope and strength. After the first quiet moments of mutual attraction in the shadow of the forest, the heroine and Apache began to feel more deeply separated, as if an invisible rope was pulling them in different directions. The world of the tribe was the living breath of the earth, the soft rustle of grass, the song of the wind in the treetops, the light of bonfires that warmed the souls, and rituals that connected with the ancestors. Everything here was imbued with meaning, harmony, and respect for every part of nature. Every stone, every path knew its own story, and people's hearts beat in unison with the heart of the earth. But beyond these borders, where villages and railways stretched, there was another world, hard, cold, full of fuss and indifference. The laws of force and authority reigned there, where a person had to fight for every step, every breath. Civilization, alien and incomprehensible, seemed alien and inhospitable. No place for their quiet, tender bond. The heroine felt as if an invisible barrier was forming between her and Apache, which could not simply be jumped over or bypassed. This barrier is not only the outer walls of the village or prejudices, it is deep inside, in their fears, doubts, and understanding that their love is not just a test, but a whole battle between two worlds that rarely merge into one. Apache, with his silent wisdom and inner strength, also felt this tension. His gaze often rested on the horizon line, where wild hills and flat fields of civilization merged. An understanding matured in his soul. To maintain this connection means to take risks, to defy the laws of both worlds. The tribe they lived in watched their approach with disbelief. The whispers and glances, barely hidden behind their backs, carried fear and misunderstanding. For many of them, the heroine was still a stranger, and her connection with Apache seemed like a formidable change, a challenge to traditions and foundations. People were afraid of change, especially when it affected the heart of their community. This separation was like a fog that was shrouding their paths more and more tightly. Every step towards each other required courage and willingness to accept not only love, but also the trials that the mixing of worlds brings with it. And as they stood on this fragile bridge between the tribe and civilization, their hearts carried heaviness and hope. The hope that their bond would withstand the onslaught of circumstances and keep the light even in the darkest days. The shadows of Apache's past enveloped him like a thick fog, barely noticeable but persistent. His silence carried more than just a habit. It was a wall built over years of pain and loss, hiding a story that few people knew about. Her gaze and gestures hid wounds that would not heal, but remained dark spots on her soul, reminding her that the past never goes away completely, even if it seems that it is immersed in oblivion. The heroine began to notice the smallest details, on which the whole essence of the Apache depended. His caution, with which he avoided certain topics, a look full of hidden anxiety when the shadow of a stranger flashed in the distance, or the sudden tension that gripped him at night watchman. Every detail became a piece of the puzzle that she was trying to put together, despite the fact that he himself was in no hurry to open. The story behind his silence was tragic and complex. The loss of loved ones, exile, the struggle with inner demons. All this left its mark on his character, on his ability to trust and love. He was afraid that if this past surfaced, it would destroy what they had tried to build together. This fear was not just a weakness, it was a protection, a safeguard against pain that could not be endured again. The threat loomed over the horizon, like the shadow of old enemies who had pursued Apache back in the days when he was a different person, someone he was now trying not to be. Their shadows lurked, ready at any moment to invade the world he was trying to preserve for himself and for her. These weren't just ghosts of the past. They were living dangers, debts, and old scores that could lead to the destruction of their new world. The heroine understood that love is not only joy and light, but also a test that requires endurance and strength. Her heart was filled with determination to support Apache, but also with a warning that this path would be thorny, full of pain and loss. With each new shadow that appeared in their path, their bond was tempered, becoming stronger despite everything. And yet, there was a quiet hope inside her, that together they could walk through this darkness, that the past would not become chains, but only lessons that would help them move forward. A new force was emerging in this realization, a force that could light up the darkest corners of their destinies and open the door to a future where love would be stronger than any shadow. The heroine's inner world turned into a battlefield where desire and fear, hope and doubt collided. She reached out to Apache, longed to be near him, to feel his support and warmth, but at the same time her heart was squeezed with fear, fear of losing him, just as she had lost many things in the past. These conflicting feelings were like a precarious balance on the edge of a knife, where every move could lead to a fall into the abyss of loneliness. Every night, when darkness descended on the camp, the heroine struggled with her own thoughts, trying to find the strength to resist anxiety, not allowing fears to consume the light that burned in her soul. There was a difficult struggle in her gaze. The desire to trust and love collided with the painful experience of loss, leaving deep wounds that were not so easy to heal. Meanwhile, Apache was in his own melee. His responsibilities to the tribe were heavy. He felt the need to protect those who had become a new home and a new family for him. But his heart was torn between duty and feelings for the girl, which grew and became stronger. He knew these feelings could make him vulnerable, but he couldn't, and didn't want to, deny them. The internal conflict was beating in him like a storm, tearing apart the calm he had been looking for so long. They both faced the demons of the past, ghosts that whispered of betrayal, pain, and loss. These ghosts sometimes rose to the surface, making them doubt their abilities and the correctness of their chosen path. The moments of silence spent alone were filled with heavy thoughts, and only sometimes did they find the courage to meet each other's eyes in order to tell each other about their fears and hopes without words. In this struggle, a fragile but strong search for balance was born between the past and the present, duty and heart, loneliness and intimacy. They learned to accept not only themselves, but also each other with all their shadows and light, realizing that true strength lies not in the absence of fear, but in the ability to move forward despite it. And it was in this search, in this inner battle, that a new chapter of their story was born. A story where love and duty intertwined into a single thread, strong and unyielding, able to withstand even the strongest storms of fate. The new feelings that were born between the heroine and Apache did not go unnoticed. A wave of doubt and caution was quietly but persistently arising within the tribe. Old wisdom and ancient prejudices held back the hearts of many. Love crossing the boundaries of the familiar world has always been a test that generates distrust and fear. The eyes of others were sometimes full of question, sometimes of hidden anxiety, as if trying to figure out if this connection would destroy what had been built and guarded for so long. The world of the tribe lived by its ancient harmony, in which every bond, every ritual, and every look were part of a large and complex mosaic. And now this mosaic was suddenly put to the test, which called into question not only the personal happiness of the heroine and Apache, but also the stability of the entire community. It was no accident that glances fell on them, filled with anxiety, sometimes with reproach. They felt the weight of expectations and the need to be strong, not only in the face of their feelings, but also in the face of the entire tribe. But the world outside their small community was no less dangerous. The shadows of new threats were gathering on the horizon. Aliens who did not share traditions, hunters eager for profit and power, unpredictable winds of change. These forces could destroy the fragile peace, make a choice where there are no easy answers. The approach of danger required not only courage, but also wisdom, the ability to see beyond the present moment, to make decisions that would affect the fate of many. For the heroine and Apache, everything became a test of strength, a test where personal feelings collided with public expectations and the harsh reality of the world around them. They had to learn to keep each other safe in an environment where every act of tenderness could cause a breakup, and every wrong step could be a tragedy for the entire tribe. In this tension, there was a need to gain not only physical strength, but also inner fortitude, an understanding that true love is not only bright moments, but also shadows of doubt, a struggle with external obstacles, and the ability to move forward, no matter what. So standing at a crossroads, they prepared for the inevitable trials, knowing that ahead of them lies not just a struggle for love, but a struggle to preserve everything that is dear to both of them. And it was this understanding that made their union even stronger, like an invisible thread connecting the two worlds into one whole, despite all the difficulties. All the tension accumulated in the past has reached its peak. The wind of change became cold and sharp, like a blade, cutting through not only the space around, but also the inner world of the heroine and the Apache. Their bond, like an ancient tree, stood in the wind, tested by storms that came not only from outside, but also from the depths of everyone's soul. At the most critical moment, they found themselves face to face with a danger that threatened to destroy everything, not only their union, but also their lives. This threat was not accidental. The shadows of Apache's past, haunting his footsteps, resurfaced like long and painful memories that cannot be left behind. Hostile forces, knowing their weaknesses and hiding in the shadows, loomed over them with the explicit goal of separating, breaking, and destroying them. But the heroine and Apache weren't the same people they used to be. Their hearts, hardened by pain and trials, found a new strength in themselves, the power of trust, which became their shield and sword. At times, when everything seemed to be falling apart, their gazes met without words, reminding them that together they could walk through any storm. Their confrontation wasn't just a physical fight. It was a spiritual battle where every gesture, every breath, every glimmer of tacit understanding became a weapon against the enemy. They used not only the strength of their bodies, but also the wisdom accumulated in silence, the ability to feel each other from a distance and not retreat in the face of fear. In this ordeal, love has become not a weakness, but a support, strong as the roots of a tree, firmly holding the earth in the most severe storms. Their union, built on respect, pain, and hope, turned into a light that no evil could overshadow. And when the battle subsided, leaving behind only echoes and ashes, the heroine and the Apache stood side by side, more connected than ever. It was a symbolic confirmation that true love can become a force capable of overcoming any obstacles, if the heart is open and the spirit is unbroken. Their gazes spoke of many things, of fears conquered together, of hopes being reborn from the ashes, that there would be many more difficulties ahead, but now they were not alone. Together, they were stronger than any enemy, stronger than any doubts, stronger than fate itself. After that intense and cruel ordeal, when fate lifted them to the edge, the heroine and Apache stood shoulder to shoulder, tired but unshakable. It wasn't just fatigue that shone in their eyes. There was a spark there, born through shared suffering, through trust nurtured by silence and unspoken promises. They knew that there would not be an easy path ahead. This world, divided between ancient traditions and new threats, will not forgive weakness and will not tolerate mistakes. But now their hearts were ready to meet any challenge. Together, they became an inseparable part of each other, like two forces of nature capable of holding back a storm and rising above it. Everything that was passed through, pain, fear, doubts, turned into the foundation of their union. This foundation was solid and reliable, like the roots of an old oak tree going deep into the ground, and even if the road was thorny and dangerous, they walked along it together, driven by hope and mutual support. And when the first morning sun began to paint the horizon with delicate gold, two silhouettes stood on a hill, their figures framed by the light of a new day. The wind played softly with their hair, reminding them of the eternal variability of life, but also of the constancy of what is created together. It was a moment of silence and understanding. Everything that had happened was just a precursor to what was yet to come. A new chapter in their lives was beginning here and now, with all the trials, new joys, and deep revelations. And in this sunrise, in this bright promise, lay the very essence of hope. Hope that even among the harsh Wild West, you can find a place for love, strength, and faith in the best. Under the morning light, which touched the ground only with a gentle touch, the heroes stood, feeling the weight of the upcoming choice. The silence between them was not just silence, it was a tense expectation in which every breath seemed decisive. Their eyes reflected the fatigue from long trials and the tension from the realization that there was no turning back. The past is left behind, closing doors that previously seemed possible, and opening only one path, forward, towards the unknown. Every moment brought closer the moment when the decision would become irreversible. Time seemed to shrink, making the air heavier and the heart beat faster. Around them, the world was inexorably changing. The wind was getting sharper, and the clouds on the horizon were thickening, reminding of the impending danger. They understood that this storm could be the last test that would test not only their love, but also their strength of spirit. In this quiet but tense space between the past and the future, there was a feeling that fate was already preparing a test for them, which they could not be late for and could not refuse. It was here, on the edge between light and shadow, between fear and hope, that they stood together, waiting for the moment that would define everything. She stood motionless, feeling a struggle flare up inside, like a whirlwind that would not let her rest. The desire for freedom, the feeling of new strength and confidence pulled her forward, promising a bright future where there were no more shackles of the past. But with it came fear, the fear of losing everything she had already built, the fear of losing that fragile but real connection with Apache, which had become an anchor for her in this turbulent world. Doubts raged in her soul, whether to accept a completely new self, whether to open her heart to love, which was not always simple, or whether to hide back into the safe shadow of habitual loneliness. These feelings were haunting, like shadows from the past that suddenly burst into the light. Images of the trials she had passed came back to her, all those nights and days when she had learned to be strong, when her life had changed with every step, when fear had given way to courage. She remembered the pain of loss and the joy of gaining, and it filled her not only with pain, but also with determination. At that moment, she realized that true freedom is not just the right to go your own way, but also the courage to accept yourself completely, with all your fears and hopes, and to trust love, even if it seems dangerous and difficult. He stood there, motionless and calm, like a rock that withstands the storm of time and winds. His presence required no words. There was a strength in that silence that sustained her in the most difficult moment of her inner struggle. He understood without explanation, read her every glance, every subtle movement. There were doubts and fears hidden in the depths of his eyes. After all, he had to make a choice that could change not only his life, but also the fate of someone who had become much more than just a companion for him. He wasn't just a mentor and protector. He was a reflection of herself, her strengths and weaknesses, those shadows that hid deep inside. Their bond was built not on words, but on feelings and trust, which manifested themselves in the simplest and most significant moments at the same time. In this silence, they found an understanding that could not be destroyed by any obstacles. This understanding was the key to a decision, a choice they had to make together, as one, despite all the trials that still had to go through. At the most critical moment, when the shadows of the past hung over them like thunderclouds, it was time to make a choice, instant and irreversible. The situation did not require reflection, but a determination that was born from the depths of the heart. There was tension in the air, as if the earth itself was holding its breath, waiting for their action. Feeling the pulse of freedom and love that she had been afraid of for so long, she took a step forward, as if breaking the invisible chains that held her captive to fears and doubts. There was a fire in her gaze, not fading, but flaring up with renewed vigor, a symbol of a new beginning. It was a moment of liberation, when the past ceased to be a prison, but became a stepping stone to the future. Her action, a simple but meaningful gesture, became not only a personal victory, but also a symbol of the fact that true love knows no boundaries and barriers. Apache stood nearby, motionless and confident. His support was an invisible but tangible force that gave him confidence to move on, no matter what. At that moment, the whole world seemed to freeze, recognizing the triumph of freedom and reciprocity, ready to accept their choice and bless their way forward. When the tension subsided and the first rays of the sun touched the ground, a quiet but unchanging melody of freedom sounded in their hearts. It was a feeling of relief, as if the weight of long doubts and fears had been lifted from my shoulders. Now a new path opened up before them, a road that could be walked together, hand in hand, accepting each other without masks and pretense. They were no longer prisoners of the past, hiding behind walls of distrust or despair. At that moment, the heroine completely accepted herself, with her wounds and strength, with vulnerability and resilience. Apache, in turn, became for her not just a companion, but a reflection of her soul, a man who sees her for real and loves her just like that. The realization that new challenges awaited them did not cause fear. Instead, it gave rise to determination and confidence. Together, they are stronger than any storms and dark nights. Freedom became their common victory, a symbol of the fact that love and acceptance are not just words, but a force that can change lives forever. And as the morning warmth spread around them, their hearts beat in unison, ready for new challenges, but no longer alone. At the top of the hill where heaven and earth meet, the heroes stood as if woven into the very fabric of nature. Their silhouettes were shrouded in the soft light of the rising sun. The rays, breaking through the foliage, seemed to weave a golden aura around them, emphasizing the inextricable connection between them and the world they had chosen. It was not just a scene from life. It was a symbol of a new life born out of struggle, pain, and love. The wind gently wrapped around them, as if whispering ancient songs of freedom and hope, reminding them that despite all the trials, new paths and new opportunities lie ahead. Their hands, barely touching each other, spoke more words. It was the language of trust and promise. There was a calmness and determination in their gazes that could withstand any storms. And on the horizon, where the sky merged with the earth, dark clouds were already gathering, a sign of new challenges that would inevitably come. But now these clouds did not frighten them, but only strengthened their faith. Together they could face any storm. Their love and freedom have become a fire that will burn through all the bad weather, lighting the way and warming the hearts. And in that moment, full of light and shadow, one thing was clear. Their story was just beginning, and there were still many pages to write together. The night fell like a soft blanket, enveloping the world in silence and tranquility. By the campfire, where fiery tongues danced, playing with shadows, the heroine sat in thought. The warm light of the flame reflected in her eyes, as if inviting her deep into her soul, to where all the worries, fears, and hopes were stored, the steps she had taken on the way to a new life. The sounds of nature, the rustle of leaves, the soft cry of a nightbird, created a familiar backdrop, reminding her of her home and the tribe that was now part of her. In this quiet world, she was no longer the timid girl she had seemed at first. There was strength inside her, backed up by experience, trials, and choices. Every wound, every tear, and every victorious moment merged into a single powerful energy that illuminated her path, even in the thickest darkness. Now she was different, confident in herself and in her destiny. The past seemed both distant and close, like a reflection in calm water, familiar, but changed by time and experience. The path that once seemed like an impenetrable forest to her has now become a road along which she walked with an open heart and a clear mind. The contrast between my former self and my current self was like a transition from night to dawn, from fear to freedom, from doubt to a firm belief in my own strength. The campfire crackled softly, as if sharing her thoughts, and at that moment there was a feeling of deep harmony, not only with herself, but also with the world around her. Here, under the stars, she felt connected to all living things, with the wind that gently touched her face, with the earth that supported her feet, and with the sky, which promised new possibilities. This moment became a symbol of the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter filled with wisdom, strength, and hope. The night sky above was dotted with stars, each of which seemed to recall her journey with the heroine, long, winding, and sometimes difficult. She recalled those early days when fear gripped her heart tenaciously, when an unknown danger seemed like an impassable wall. Every moment of anxiety, every dark night when it seemed like there was no hope anymore, was part of her inner battle. But it was these trials that became the forge of her character, where her spirit was tempered and a new strength was born. She realized now that true beauty was not in smooth skin or a bright dress, but in the ability to withstand the storm, not to lose herself in a whirlwind of doubts and dangers. In this fire of trials, her true nature was revealed, gentle but indomitable, capable of loving and protecting. The love she carried in her heart became a source of light, capable of dispelling the deepest shadows of fear. Her gaze lingered on the sparks dancing in the fire, as if they reflected life itself, with its ups and downs, with lessons that brought moments of pain and joy. The inner peace that came after a long struggle filled her soul with gratitude for the path she had traveled. Every step, every choice, every tear has become an invaluable experience, leading to the realization that strength is inside, and love is the main beacon in the night. The fire crackled and softly illuminated the heroine's face, reflecting in her eyes the depth of her experience. Behind every moment he lived, there was a wisdom that could not be gained except through trials and mistakes. She understood now that true strength is born not in the struggle with the outside world, but in self-acceptance with all fears, doubts, and dreams. Only by coming to terms with your own vulnerability can you open the door to true freedom. Love, like a gentle but strong root, supported her in the most difficult moments. It wasn't just an emotion, it was an energy that inspired me to move on, not to give up, not to lose faith in myself and those around me. She felt like every day her and Apache's union was strengthening, becoming not just a bond of two hearts, but a symbol of strength that could overcome any obstacles. The wisdom that the tribe and nature gave her taught her to see beauty in the simple, in the rustle of the wind, in the power of the earth, in the vast expanses of the sky. Apache became her teacher not of words, but of deeds, showing that true courage is not only the strength of the hand, but also the purity of the spirit. All this filled her heart with deep respect for life and for herself, a reminder that every step is a lesson, and every day is a new chance to become a better person. The night slowly enveloped the world, but there was a fire burning around the campfire, not only in the flame, but also in the heroine's heart. She knew that the path of each of us is full of trials and shadows, but it is in them that the light is born. And now, addressing those who are listening to her story, she whispered without words, sending warmth and strength to her thoughts. Believing in yourself is the first step to changing your life. After all, there is an unbroken spirit inside everyone, waiting for the moment to open up. Even when it seems that everything around us is dark and hopeless, it is faith in a miracle, in the possibility of change, that becomes the anchor that keeps us afloat. Everyone can become the hero of their own story, not because they are chosen by fate, but because they are not afraid to move forward, do not give up in the face of difficulties, and take responsibility for their lives. This faith is the true power that can light up the darkest path. And it was this fire, this light, that she passed on to everyone who was willing to listen and believe. The heroine was sitting by the campfire, her face illuminated by the soft, warm light of the flame. Fire was reflected in the depths of her eyes, a symbol of hope, an inner light that did not fade despite all the trials. The silence of the night enveloped her, filling her with peace and strength, as if nature itself kept her in the arms of tranquility. Everything was in this moment: the completion of the path, the realization of what had been past, and faith in the future. The flame slowly danced, telling its secrets, and it seemed that it shared her thoughts and dreams with the heroine. The firelight merged with the twinkling of the stars, creating an atmosphere of wonder and eternity. So she stayed, sitting in silence, reminding everyone who watches and listens that even in the darkest nights there is light. The light that lives inside us and leads us forward to new roads, new hopes, and new stories. Thank you for being with us and walking this path together with the heroes of our history. Every moment of your attention is a support that inspires and makes sense of our words. If this story has touched you, please leave a like. It's a sign that our story is important and needed. I will be grateful for your thoughts and comments, because sharing our views helps us grow and create even more vivid and powerful stories. Subscribe so that you don't miss the new narratives in which life unfolds in all its depth. See you soon. May your path be filled with light and wisdom, and your heart with fortitude and faith. There is a power in each of us that can change our fate and create our own legend. Thank you for being with us. See you soon.